Yo, welcome to the Sandyman Show. I am Sandy Colero, and I welcome you here where you, the listeners, are the star of this show. This is the podcast intro for the Sandyman Show, where you're the star of the show. And now you know. Welcome. Today's episode is called Tom Brady, Highly Sensitive Athletes and the Spirit of Endurance. Before we get into things, if you could hit subscribe or type in some comments, hit the like button, whatever platform you're on, that would be helpful for me and my family. And I want to welcome you to the beginning. Many of us know one another already. Some of you might be new friends or soon to be friends. And I'd like to just acknowledge that it is winter time. I'm here in Lake Country, Okanagan style, Canada living, and we're aware that Tom Brady is approaching retirement, possibly. I don't believe it's official, but why that may matter to some of us is that he has had a marvelously successful athletic career, hasn't he? Whether you're a lover or a hater, it was years ago I picked up this book of his. I took the cover off, but it explores his TB12 method. It's called The TB12 Method by Tom Brady. And it's got just some fantastic information about how he has operated at such a high-performing level in his athletic career. But why I think it's important for myself and those of you listening is that he may be transitioning to life after sports. And some of us are there. We're in our lives after sports. Some of you aren't quite there yet, but you do have a life outside of your sport. And so what we're going to be exploring is what it looks like to perform at a high level in life, particularly in our relationships with other people, whether they be at work or at home. But before I get too much further into that, I just want to acknowledge that I have learned of this thing called being a highly sensitive person. It's a trait that this Dr. Elaine Aron mentions in her fairly well-known book, The Highly Sensitive Person. But so many of us have never even heard of HSP. And maybe this is good news for you today, especially if you're an athlete, that there's a trait called HSP. It's pretty easy to kind of figure out and assess whether you have the HSP trait or not. Many people do, male and female. And we'll go into some more of those details at another time. But just mentioning my wife, Brita, some of you know her. She is a trained registered counselor. And as she was going through her master's of counseling psychology, she would often come home from classes and she'd come home from workshops and she'd be learning about some sort of, let's call it, condition or some sort of I don't know, mental mindset or whatever. So for example, she'd be studying Asperger's and she'd come home and she'd be like, Sandy, you have Asperger's. And I'd be like, why do you say that? And she'd maybe start to say things and I'd kind of arrive at the thought, like, I don't think I have Asperger's. And other times she'd come home and she'd be like, ADHD, Sandy, you got ADHD. And I'd be like, oh, maybe I have ADHD. Like, I got friends who got ADHD. And just all these different things. She'd come home and she'd sort of say, you got this. And I'd be like, nah, I don't think I got that. And then just this summer, summer 2021, someone said, why don't you work with other highly sensitive people? And I was like, highly sensitive people? I was almost offended at the idea or the thought of being called highly sensitive until I realized it's a thing. This person was referring to this thing called being a highly sensitive person, and as a sensitive person I was reacting to being called a highly sensitive person. So that was maybe my first clue that I was on that sensitive side, and I started to read just blogs online. This Elaine Aron gal, what she does to kind of manage pressure and responsibility and stress as a successful person, and I just started to laugh. I was like, I don't even need to take the official assessment. I am a highly sensitive person. So I don't see that necessarily as a negative trait. She certainly presents it as a positive one, but it's been a long process to learn how to leverage being a highly sensitive person for good and to help particularly my family, to help the people I work with. It's been a journey, and so this is hopefully a journey some of you will join me on. in the next while, whether it's through the podcast or through a membership community that we have formed. But for now, I just want to highlight that I'd like to focus on those of you who have an athletic background and may be discovering that you are a highly sensitive person. So we'll call these highly sensitive athletes. Now, to be clear, I'm not suggesting Tom Brady is a highly sensitive athlete. However, I am saying that if you are an athlete and you want to live at your highest capacity and you're highly sensitive, then it's going to take some work. It's going to take some strategic planning, and it's probably going to take some friends to help you stay the course. Want to mention how important it has been for me as an athlete to work towards growing, improving, and ultimately being a champion. And so the idea is for you to recognize your desire to win, to experience victory, if you're no longer engaged in specific sports. Well, what does it look like to be a champion in your life? What does it look like to be a champion at work? What does it look like to be a champion at home with your family, with your community? And unfortunately, what I see a lot of, whether we're talking about online business owners or entrepreneurs or managers, CEOs or helping professions, is a lot of people have one of those areas functioning really well. And what I'm referring to particularly is those whose work is full of accomplishments and achievements and accolades and awards and the like. But you find out, or you have to dig sometimes to identify that their home life is just a mess. Either they're on, multiple spouses and they've got these just sort of burnt bridges behind them, and it's a mess relationally. And so for me, this vision of being champions includes really healthy, hardy, dynamic relationships in the workplace as well as at home, and even beyond, for those of you who are adventuresome. So this is about people. This podcast is going to be a lot about people and how we relate to people, how we work in teams, how we work when we're on our own with other people in mind. But it also will blend in this spirit of endurance, this idea that, some things require perseverance. They require a stick-to-itiveness. And I'm hoping that many of you will be encouraged to not necessarily just flee your circumstances, but kind of reach a new depth or a new height that will allow you to endure the circumstances that you're in. Because it's not always the wisest choice to leave your circumstances. Sometimes there's more learning to be had before that departure, or sometimes we're actually called to just tuck in and find a new way to approach the things that are in front of us. So this spirit of endurance for me has needed to develop because of additional responsibilities that have been added to my life as I've grown up and as I'm still growing up. So one of those things is I feel like I was being placed in positions of leadership, often, at least early on, against my wishes. I didn't want responsibility. I'm a youngest child. I didn't want to be a leader. I just wanted to play. I just wanted to perform. I just wanted to compete. And I'd wind up in these responsible leadership roles. And I kind of was begrudging at that until over time I began to realize my way of leading was fulfilling. But it took me some time to identify what is my way of leading. And that's something in the coming episodes I plan to share with you. But along with responsibility and kind of that leadership role, there was stress. And I was not able to be aware of my stress levels. And then when I was aware of my stress levels, I didn't have healthy ways of coping with stress or managing my stress. And it's been a journey. Hope we can explore some stress conversations. Maybe some of you are stress specialists, and I could interview you on this podcast. But stress for me has been a great dance, learning that I don't even do well when I have no stress. So that balance of dialing in what kind of tension I operate best at, and then what kind of tension the people around me can handle. Because if I'm operating at my premium stress level, that doesn't always go well with some of the people who are closest to me. So learning how to manage stress is part of this, as well as some of you know my family, my immediate family, is recovering from a significant injury. My wife Brady was skiing at our local mountain called Silver Star Resort and just slipped and has had a very severe injury. She has become paralyzed. She's paraplegic, and so we as a family, it's a year now later, and we're still on a long learning curve and healing trajectory, making gains. There's progress happening all the time, but she is not expected to walk again in this life and on this earth. We're always hopeful of the impossible. We believe in miracles as a family, but for now we're learning a new way. And so some of this spirit of endurance really draws from what it looks like to know something as normal and have that feel lost and then have to rediscover a new normal. Behind me you see some skis. Now these are not alpine downhill skis, these are cross-country skis. And cross-country skiing was completely lost on me in the first 40 years of my life. But a couple weeks ago I went to this place called Sovereign Lakes and I started cross-country skiing for the first time. I just felt like I need to get into greater fitness shape. I'm wanting to put on some mass, which has been difficult for me. You know, I'm not looking for pity. I'm just saying that's my body image stuff working out, but I'm cross-country skiing and I'm flopping around. You know, I'm not a short guy and kind of lanky, and there's all these elderly people just like buzzing by me, you know. So I'm this young 40-year-old guy, maybe not that young, but here I'm going and there's these elderly people just blowing by me, and I'm going, I'm not good at this sport, but I'm starting to understand its goodness. I see how endurance rather than adrenaline is part of this. Although I did have little shots of adrenaline the 3 times that I fell as I learned the different edges of these skis. And I'm planning after this shoot to head down to the Okanagan Rail Trail, just this nice flat trail. It's not cross-country ski oriented, but we just had some snow last night and I'd like to get in on it. So I'm going to go for a cross-country ski. And all of this is part of the journey to be a person who knows how to endure challenges, endure hardships. And not just so that we can say I'm a champion, but so that we can have the kind of influence on the people around us that we find fulfilling. So if you didn't hear at the beginning, a way you can help me out is just subscribe to whatever platform you're on. Subscribe to this podcast or this channel. If you would consider commenting, asking questions, shouting out something you want me to hear, I'll try and read those. And if you can like this podcast, this video, that'd be helpful too. Also conducting some interviews. If you're kind of on the journey wondering if you are a highly sensitive person or if you're a highly sensitive athlete, then if you can find the link to sign up for this just free interview with me, I'd like to ask you some questions as I continue to put together a course or a program for others of us. And for now, just want to wish you well and suggest that Tom Brady and his career has been a wonder. It's been marvelous. Whether you are a Pats or a Buccaneers fan, or whether you even care about the NFL at all, guys like him and Michael Jordan and LeBron James and Wayne Gretzky and Tiger Woods, like they found a way to really thrive and flourish in their sport. And part of what I'm hoping to continue to keep in front of your mind is that you too can be a champ. You know, the alternative might be being a chump, and we don't want to go there. And I don't want you to go there. And if you are there, I just want to suggest that maybe we can be a part of each other's stories so that we can stay more on the champ side rather than the chump side. And that those of us who want to serve and show up for our families and our friends and our jobs, we can do that wonderfully well. So all the love to you and yours, and we'll see you hopefully again in the next video or the next podcast. Peace out. This is the podcast outro of the Sandyman Show, where you're the stars of the show. It's time for us to rock and roll. What do you think, Sal? Time to do it?
Sure.
Time to go.